Oh, there you are, sitting there like a desperate soul, trapped in the dark, chained by memories that should have been left behind. Look at yourself, drowning in sorrow, holding on to what's already gone. You let their absence define you, like they were the air you needed to breathe. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. They were never the air. You were the storm. They didn't leave because you were worthless. They left because they couldn't handle your worth. They saw a fire in you they couldn't control, so they did the only thing weak people do. They ran. As the saying goes, ships don't sink because of the water around them. They sink because of the water that gets in them. And you let their rejection seep into your soul. You let it define who you are. You let it make you feel small, disposable, replaceable. You believed that because they left, something must be wrong with you. Wrong. You see, life is full of stories like yours. Look at people sharing their heartbreak online, abandoned after years of loyalty, ghosted after showing nothing but love. One person shared how they were left right after sacrificing everything for someone. Another said they built a future with someone who walked away without a backward glance. But here's the twist. Every one of them rose higher than ever before. One man shared how losing someone pushed him to start a business he'd been too afraid to try. He's now a CEO. A woman left broken after betrayal rediscovered her passion for painting. Her work now hangs in galleries. Rejection didn't end their story. It started their legacy. As someone once said, the phoenix must burn to emerge. You've been burning, suffering, but what comes next is your rise. Their rejection wasn't your burial, it was your rebirth. They didn't leave because you were too little. They left because you were too much, too intense, too ambitious, too real. They couldn't match your energy, so they played games until you broke. They hoped you'd crumble, hoped you'd fall apart, begging for closure, chasing what never deserved you in the first place. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated you. As someone wisely said, it's not the load that breaks you down, but the way you carry it. Right now, you're still carrying their rejection like a curse. But that's not what it is. It's a gift in disguise. They freed you from a life of being half-loved, half-chosen, half-seen. They thought leaving you would leave you powerless. But instead, they just ignited something far greater. Think about the legends in history. Great kings and queens didn't rise from comfort. They rose from ashes, cast out, betrayed, doubted. They built empires from nothing but grit and fire. That fire now burns in you. As Bo Bennett once said, rejection is nothing more than a necessary step in the pursuit of success. Their rejection isn't your failure, it's your fuel. They thought they closed the book on you. But all they did was start your next chapter. One where you rule. One where you become untouchable. Imagine this. A king without a kingdom is still a king. Even when cast out, he still holds the power of his destiny. His throne wasn't built by approval. It was built by resilience. You are that ruler now. You've been dethroned by someone who never deserved your loyalty, but you still wear the crown. You're not a victim. You're the heir to your own future. As the famous quote goes, I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around me. You've already lived through the worst they could do to you. You've survived the heartbreak, the loneliness, the betrayal. So tell me, what else is left to fear? What could possibly break you now? They thought leaving would end you, but all it did was set you free. They were never the prize. You were. Picture this. Years from now, they'll hear your name spoken in rooms they can't enter. They'll see your success in places they'll never belong. They'll scroll through memories of you, realizing they lost the very thing they could never replace. Because you were never just an option, you were the whole kingdom. Let them watch from the sidelines while you build your empire. Let them hear your name echoed through stories of triumph they can't rewrite. Let them feel the weight of what they walked away from. And when they try to come back, when they realize they can't escape the memory of you, you won't be there. Say it out loud. I am the fire they can't control. Burn bright. Rise higher. Let them watch. Because this isn't your ending. It's your reign. Number 1. They already know your response. Because they wrote the script for you. Have you ever noticed how predictable they thought you were? How they played you like a character in a script they wrote? They crafted the story, cast themselves as the hero, and left you as the disposable side character, always available, always predictable, always the one they could control. And the most painful part? You followed their script, almost word for word. Think about it. Every time they ignored you, they expected you to chase them. Every time they hurt you, they predicted your silence. Every time they left, they knew you'd wait, hoping, praying that maybe, just maybe, they'd come back. You weren't just living your life, you were living the role they assigned to you. Like a marionette, you danced to their pull. They didn't even have to ask, they already knew your next move. But here's the thing about their script. It was never about you. It was always about their need for control. Like a puppet master, they needed to feel powerful, knowing they could pull the strings and get exactly what they wanted. They didn't see you as a person with your own thoughts, dreams, and worth. No, they saw you as a character they could shape, a tool they could use, a placeholder until something else came along. As someone once said, the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. That's exactly what happened. You didn't even realize they were scripting your life, not until the weight of their manipulation became unbearable. Let me give you an example. There's a story shared on a forum by a woman who was in a long-term relationship. For years, she found herself bending over backward for her partner, changing her plans, sacrificing her dreams, always being there no matter how little she got in return. When he finally left her for someone else, she was devastated. But when she looked back, she realized something chilling. He had always known how she would respond. He had counted on her loyalty, her forgiveness, her silence. She'd been living a script, not her own, and that's the harsh reality. People like this don't just leave. They plan your reaction. They expect you to stay in the same predictable role, hoping for their return, blaming yourself for their choices, and feeling like you'll never be enough without them. It's how they maintain their illusion of control, even when they're gone. But let me tell you something they never expected. You don't have to play along. There's a saying, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. You've been living in their version of you, following their script. Now it's time to tear those pages apart and start creating a life they can't predict. A life they have no control over. Imagine a play where the main character suddenly steps off the stage and decides to rewrite the ending. The audience is stunned. The other actors don't know what to do. That's exactly what happens when you break free from their expectations. They won't know how to handle it because their power came from your predictability. When you stop reacting the way they expect, they lose control. Think about this. What would happen if instead of crying when they left, you smiled and walked away? What if, instead of chasing them, you ran toward your own goals? What if, instead of giving them the satisfaction of your pain, You gave yourself the gift of your own power. As the saying goes, the best way to predict the future is to create it. That's the key here. They think they know your future because they think they know you. But they've never truly known you. They've only known the version of you that catered to them. Now, it's time to show them, and yourself, who you really are. Take another real-life example. A man shared how his ex always manipulated him into staying, even when he knew the relationship was toxic. She'd pull away, knowing he'd come running. She'd ignore his needs, knowing he'd prioritize hers. But one day, after another staged argument designed to make him apologize, he simply didn't. He walked away. He said nothing, and for the first time she panicked. Why? Because he wasn't following the script anymore. He took back his power by choosing silence over submission, self-respect over seeking her approval. You see, the moment you stop being predictable, everything changes. It's like playing chess and suddenly moving in a way that's completely unexpected. The opponent loses their advantage. Their strategy crumbles. That's what happens when you rewrite their script. But I know what you're thinking. How do I do that? How do I break free from years of following their lead? It starts with understanding this. You are not the role they gave you. You are the author of your own life. Remember the words of Viktor Frankl, who said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." You may not be able to change what they did, but you can change how you respond. And that's where your power lies, in your response. Their script depended on you staying stuck. It depended on you doubting yourself, needing them, and shrinking every time they pulled away. But now you see the truth. They only had control because you gave it to them. Picture this. A lion in a cage is only dangerous if it forgets it has claws. That's you. You've been caged by their expectations, forgetting that you hold all the power. The moment you remember who you are, the cage becomes irrelevant. You're not meant to perform in someone else's story. You're meant to rule your own kingdom. When you stop reacting the way they want, they lose their power over you. And when they lose that power, something incredible happens. They start to fear you, not because you're cruel or vindictive, but because they realize they can no longer predict your moves. Their script has fallen apart. And here's the kicker. When you rise above their games, they'll regret underestimating you. They'll see your name in places they never thought you'd reach. They'll hear about your success in rooms they can't enter. Because while they were busy writing your downfall, you were busy writing your comeback. As someone once said, you don't write your destiny, you build it. Every choice you make from here on is a brick in the empire you're building. And trust me, they'll see it, they'll feel it. They'll know they no longer hold any power over you. So stop following their script, burn it, write your own. Let them watch as you rise higher than they ever imagined. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's becoming everything they never believed you could be. You are not their story. You are your own masterpiece. And hey, you know what? This video you're watching right now, it truly deserves a like. If you haven't pressed that like button yet, do it right now. By hitting that like button, you're not just supporting this channel, you're helping spread this message to others who are stuck, searching for strength, just like you were. Someone out there needs to hear these words, needs to be reminded of their power, and you can be the reason they find it. So go ahead, press that like button right now. Let's reach more people, let's inspire more comebacks, and let's build a community of kings and queens reclaiming their thrones. Your story isn't over, it's just getting started. Number 2. They never knew their goodbye was your green light. They thought saying goodbye was the final blow, the ending that would leave you broken, lost, and stuck. In their mind, leaving was the ultimate power move. They walked away with confidence, expecting you to collapse under the weight of their absence. But here's the twist they never saw coming. Their goodbye was your green light. It was the exact moment you were set free to rise beyond anything they ever imagined. They thought they were shutting a door, locking you out of the life you built together. But what they didn't realize is that some doors aren't meant to be reopened. They're meant to be kicked down or left behind forever. They thought their departure would leave you wandering in the dark, desperate to be let back in. But in reality, their goodbye lit a fire so bright that the darkness doesn't exist anymore. You became your own source of light. As someone once said, every ending is a new beginning. You just don't see it yet. They couldn't see that their exit was the exact push you needed to become unstoppable. The end they orchestrated wasn't your downfall. It was your release from a cycle that was holding you back. They thought leaving you powerless would elevate them, but all it did was unleash a version of you that no longer needs them. Think about a rocket. The very thing that pushes it into space is the force of separation. The booster falling away is what lets the rocket soar higher than ever before. That's what their goodbye was. Just a booster falling away, no longer needed for where you're going. They were never the fuel. They were only the weight you needed to shed. Look at stories shared online. Stories from people who thought their lives were over after a breakup, a betrayal, or even being abandoned by someone they trusted with everything. One man shared how his long-term partner left him after years of shared dreams. He thought it was the end, until he realized her departure meant he could finally pursue the career he always put on hold for her. Today, he runs a successful business she never believed he could build. Another woman shared how being ghosted by someone she deeply loved pushed her to travel solo, a dream she'd buried while waiting for someone to be her partner in adventure. That first trip changed everything. Today, she's built a life filled with experiences and memories she wouldn't trade for anything, not even the relationship she thought she couldn't live without. As the saying goes, rejection is often redirection. What they intended as an ending was the very thing that redirected you to something far greater. Their goodbye didn't mean failure, it meant freedom. You were freed from waiting, freed from hoping, freed from shrinking yourself to fit into their world. They thought they were cutting you off from something valuable, but the only thing they did was remove themselves from your story. A story that was always meant to be bigger than them. But I get it. You might be thinking, why did it have to happen this way? Why couldn't they see my worth before leaving? The answer is simple. Sometimes people are blind to value until it's no longer theirs. They couldn't see your potential because they were too focused on their own wants. Their world was too small for someone meant to build an empire. There's a famous quote that says, sometimes you have to lose something good to find something great. What they don't know, and what you might be realizing now, is that their goodbye was never about your worth. It was about their limits. They couldn't see the future you were capable of because they were too busy living in the comfort of the present. And while they moved on, expecting you to fade away, you were already evolving into something greater. They thought their absence would leave a void, but instead, it cleared space for something far better. They expected your life to slow down, not realizing their goodbye was your green light to go full throttle. Picture a race car stuck behind a slower driver. The moment the car moves out of the way, the path is clear and the race truly begins. That's exactly what happened when they left. They moved out of the way, and now nothing can hold you back. You're moving forward faster, stronger, and with more purpose than ever before. And here's something they'll never admit. Their biggest fear isn't that you needed them. It's that you'll thrive without them. They hoped leaving would leave you shattered, but deep down, they feared exactly what's happening now. You're rising, evolving, and becoming someone they can't even reach anymore. As author Paulo Coelho once said, "When someone leaves, it's because someone else is about to arrive." That someone could be a new love, a new opportunity, or, most importantly, a new version of yourself. The version that doesn't wait for permission, doesn't beg for validation, and doesn't slow down for anyone unwilling to keep up. Imagine them scrolling through their social media feed years from now, seeing your success splashed across screens they can't escape. Imagine them hearing your name in rooms they'll never enter. The reality is, they left thinking you'd be forgotten, but your legacy is already being written. And trust me, your success will be louder than their silence ever was. They thought goodbye would end the story, but you're the author. You've been writing your next chapter all along, and now you're finally free to make it as bold, as daring, and as brilliant as you choose. They may have walked away, but now you're running toward everything you were meant for. So let their goodbye be what it was always meant to be, your green light, a signal that the past is gone and the future is yours to conquer. They were never the destination, only a temporary stop on a much bigger journey. As someone once said, some people leave not because your story is over, but because their role in your life has ended. They were never the ending, they were just the chapter that led to your breakthrough. And now, it's time to go. Number 3. Their strategy failed the moment you refused to follow their script. They thought they had it all figured out. Every move you would make, every word you would say, they had already played it out in their heads, like a well-rehearsed game. Their plan wasn't just to leave you, it was to control how you'd react after they did. They expected your desperation, your endless messages, your longing for closure. They counted on your weakness, your loneliness, your need for validation. But what they never expected was silence. You see, their strategy wasn't just about walking away, it was about keeping you chained even after they left. They planned on living rent-free in your mind, haunting your every thought. Their script depended on you playing the role they'd assigned, the heartbroken one, the chaser, the one stuck in the past while they moved on. But what happens when the star of the show refuses to perform? As someone once said, the best way to defeat your enemy is to refuse to engage in their war. That's exactly where their plan crumbles. Their power comes from your reaction. Without it, they're left with nothing. Like a magician exposed, their tricks lose their magic the moment you stop believing in the illusion. Think of it like a chess game. In their mind, you're playing by the rules they set, always reacting to their moves, always a few steps behind. They make a bold play, expecting you to respond out of fear or desperation. But what if, instead of playing their game, you flipped the board entirely? What if you refused to play at all? Suddenly, their strategy collapses. Their power wasn't in their moves. It was in predicting yours. There's a story shared by a man on a forum. He was in a toxic on-again, off-again relationship where his ex would break up with him, expecting him to come running back every time. It was a twisted cycle she controlled, knowing he'd always return. But one day, something inside him snapped. When she ended things for the 5th time, he didn't beg, he didn't call, he didn't text, he simply disappeared. At first, she acted like she didn't care, but when he remained silent, she started calling, messaging, showing up at his house. Her entire strategy had failed because he refused to follow the script she wrote. This is what people like that fear the most: your indifference. They can handle your anger, your tears, even your hatred, but your indifference, that's what keeps them awake at night. It shows them they no longer have control. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't care. They can't play games with someone who's no longer on the field. As the saying goes, not every action deserves a reaction. When you master this truth, you become untouchable. They can lie, manipulate, and try every trick in the book. But if you refuse to engage, their strategy is dead on arrival. Imagine a fire needing oxygen to survive. That's how their manipulation works. Your responses are the air they need to keep the flames alive. But when you starve the fire, it dies. They expected your reaction because that's what always kept their control burning bright. But this time, you didn't give them what they wanted. Think about how powerful that makes you. They can't toy with someone who doesn't respond. They can't string along someone who refuses to be a puppet. They can't break someone who has already decided to rise. I know what you're thinking. But what if they come back? Trust me, they will. The moment you refuse to play, they'll panic. They'll wonder why their old tricks aren't working. They'll reach out, test the waters, send those "I miss you" texts or "Can we talk?" messages, hoping to reset the game. But here's where you win. You don't respond. You stay in control by staying silent. As someone once said, power is the ability to walk away from something you once thought you couldn't live without. That's what they never expected. That you'd realize you're better off without them. That you'd finally see your worth isn't tied to how they treat you, but to how you treat yourself. Picture this. A master manipulator's greatest fear isn't being confronted, it's being ignored. They thrive on drama, chaos, and emotional reactions. They want you to scream, cry, beg, and plead, because all of that still keeps them relevant. But your silence? It makes them irrelevant. It forces them to face the one thing they can't control: your freedom. There's another story about a woman who left her toxic relationship after years of emotional abuse. Her ex would disappear for weeks, knowing she'd always break down and call him first. But after their final fight, she simply stopped. She deleted his number, blocked him on everything, and started focusing on herself. Weeks later, he began calling from unknown numbers, emailing her, even showing up at her workplace. Why? Because his strategy depended on her chasing him. When she didn't, his entire game fell apart. And that's exactly what you need to understand. The moment you refuse to follow their script, they lose. Their entire strategy was built on predicting your next move. But when you become unpredictable, when you choose peace over conflict, self-love over validation, they have nothing left. As the saying goes, sometimes the best way to win is to not play the game at all. Let them wonder. Let them sit in confusion, questioning why their manipulative tricks aren't working anymore. Let them feel the emptiness of the space where your attention used to be, because that's where you reclaim your power. You are no longer their puppet, no longer their backup plan, their emotional safety net, their predictable reaction. You are something they never expected, free. So, when they come knocking, when they try to draw you back into the cycle, remember this. Their strategy only works if you play along. But you're not the same person anymore. You've rewritten the story. You've burned their script. And now, you're the one they can't figure out. You are the fire they can't control. Number 4. They tried to erase you, but you wrote a legacy they can't ignore. They thought they could make you disappear. They thought walking away would erase every trace of you, like you never existed. They believed that by shutting you out, by pretending you never mattered, they could rewrite the story, one where you were just a passing chapter, easily forgotten. But they didn't realize something crucial. You were never just a chapter. You were the entire book. See, people like that think power comes from leaving, from rejecting, from making you feel small. They believe that silence and absence will reduce you to nothing. They convince themselves that the world will forget you, that time will erase your presence like words written in sand, washed away by the tide. But you are not made of sand. You are carved in stone. Think of all the legends, the icons, the greats who were doubted, dismissed, or cast aside. History is filled with people who were underestimated, people who were meant to fade into obscurity, but instead became unforgettable. Their stories were supposed to end in failure, but instead they wrote legacies that time couldn't touch. As someone once said, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds." Your rejection, your heartbreak, your struggle, that was never the end. It was the soil where your greatness began to grow. They thought they could wipe you away like a smudge on a window, but all they did was create the perfect backdrop for your rise. They made you visible in ways they'll never be able to ignore. Imagine this. A sculptor chisels away at a block of marble, thinking the pieces he's breaking off are just discarded fragments. But with every strike, he's revealing something powerful underneath. A masterpiece he never intended to create. You are that masterpiece. They thought by cutting you out of their life, they were cutting you down. But instead, they were just shaping you into something greater. You didn't fade. You evolved. You didn't break. You rebuilt. And now, you've become something they can't escape. Something they'll see long after they thought you were gone. There's a story of a young writer whose work was rejected by publishers over 100 times. They told him his stories were worthless, that no one would ever care about his words. But he refused to be erased. He kept writing, kept pushing, and eventually the world couldn't ignore him anymore. His name? Stephen King. The very people who tried to erase him ended up watching him build an empire of stories that will outlast them all. And you might be thinking, but what if I never get that chance? What if I'm just forgotten? Let me ask you something. Who decides what gets remembered? It's not the people who leave. It's not the ones who try to diminish your worth. It's you. You decide what story gets written next. You decide how your name will be remembered, not by begging for recognition, but by building a legacy they can't ignore. As the saying goes, success is the best revenge. But this isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about becoming so undeniable that even those who tried to erase you can't escape the echo of your rise. Think about the stars in the night sky. Long after they've burned out, their light still travels through the universe. We see them shining, even though they're no longer there. That's what happens when you leave a legacy. Long after they thought you were gone, your impact will still be felt. There's another true story about a woman who was fired from her dream job, a devastating blow. She was told she wasn't creative enough and would never succeed in her field. Instead of accepting that ending, she used the rejection as fuel to create her own company. Her name? Sarah Blakely, the billionaire founder of Spanx. The very people who dismissed her now watch her brand dominate the world. And that's the truth about life. You don't need their permission to succeed. They can try to erase you, dismiss you, block you, and shut you out. But they can't stop you from rising. They can't rewrite a future they're no longer part of. Maybe they thought leaving you behind meant you'd be forgotten, but they forgot that you were never the forgettable one. They thought their silence would fade your memory, but now your success will become the loudest thing they'll ever hear. They'll see your achievements in places they'll never belong. They'll hear your name in conversations they can't be part of. And when they realize they can't ignore your legacy, it won't be because you wanted revenge. It'll be because you finally embraced who you were meant to be. Unstoppable, unbreakable, unforgettable. There's a powerful quote that says, "History remembers those who refuse to be erased." That's you now. They tried to close the book on your story, but all they did was inspire you to write a better one. They thought they could define your ending, but only you hold that power. So let them watch. Let them hear your name in places they never expected. Let your success be the story they can't run from. Because in the end, you were never someone they could erase. You were always someone destined to rise. Say it out loud. I am the legacy they can't ignore. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. And trust me, they'll never forget it. Number 5. They thought you'd fall apart. Instead, you built an empire. They thought leaving you would break you. They thought their absence would shatter you into a million pieces, leaving you lost, hopeless, and forgotten. They expected to hear stories of your downfall, to see you struggling, stuck in the ruins they left behind. But what they never saw coming was you, rising from the wreckage, stronger, sharper, and more unstoppable than ever. Their departure wasn't the end of your story. It was the blueprint for your empire. The pain they caused, the betrayal they delivered, the loneliness they left you with, all of it became the foundation on which you built something they could never take away. Your power. As the saying goes, when you hit rock bottom, the only way left is up. You were supposed to fall apart, remember? They expected to see you crumble under the weight of rejection, waiting for a rescue that was never coming. But instead of breaking, you dug deep. You turned the rubble of what was destroyed into stepping stones for your rise. Let me tell you about a woman from an online forum who shared her story. After being abandoned by her fiancé just weeks before their wedding, she was left with nothing but shattered dreams and debt from wedding expenses. She could have given up. She could have let that heartbreak define her. But instead, she used her pain as fuel. She turned her passion for baking into a small business, working day and night. Today, she owns a chain of successful bakeries. Her empire was built from the ashes of her worst moment. This is what people like them never understand. They can leave, but they can't take your fire. They thought you were dependent on their presence, that you'd fall apart the moment they disappeared. What they failed to see is that your power was never tied to their approval. It was always within you. As someone once said, your setback is just a setup for a comeback. Every rejection, every abandonment, every betrayal, these weren't endings. They were seeds for something greater, something they couldn't even comprehend. They thought by leaving you behind, they were rising above. What they didn't realize is that they were clearing the path for your empire to be built. Think about how empires throughout history have risen. Great kingdoms were often born out of devastating losses and impossible challenges. Castles weren't built from comfort. They were built from grit, strategy, and relentless perseverance. You're doing the same thing. Every brick of your empire is forged from resilience, each wall fortified by lessons learned from the pain they caused. A man once shared how he lost everything, his job, his home, and even his partner, within the same month. While most people expected him to spiral into despair, he used his rock-bottom moment as motivation. He poured his energy into learning new skills, starting a business from scratch. Today, he runs a successful tech company, and those who left him behind now watch from the sidelines, amazed by what he's become. The best revenge is massive success. They thought they could leave you with nothing, thinking you'd never rise again. They were counting on your despair. But here you are, still standing, still breathing, still fighting. What they never saw coming was the version of you that rejection helped create, the unstoppable force that emerged from the darkest days. They underestimated you because they couldn't see past their limited understanding of strength. They thought power came from having control over others. They thought leaving you would reduce you, that you'd shrink into irrelevance. But real power comes from rising when you've been knocked down. It comes from building when you have nothing but your will to survive. You are like a phoenix, rising not just despite the fire, but because of it. They tried to burn you down, not realizing that flames are your element. The fire they thought would consume you only fueled your transformation. Picture this: a barren field after a wildfire. It looks destroyed, lifeless, but beneath the ashes, new life starts to grow, stronger, wilder, more resilient than before. That's you. They thought your life would be barren after they left, but they didn't realize that you were just clearing the ground for something extraordinary to grow. They thought you'd spend your days crying, wondering what went wrong. They never expected you to turn your tears into a river of unstoppable ambition. They thought your nights would be filled with loneliness, not realizing they were fueling the silence needed for your greatest breakthroughs. You see, empires aren't built in the spotlight. They are built in the dark, when no one's watching, when you're grinding, learning, evolving. While they were busy celebrating your supposed downfall, you were quietly crafting a future that would outshine anything they could ever imagine. And one day, they'll hear your name in rooms they can't enter. They'll see your success in places they'll never belong. Your legacy will become the echo of everything they lost when they chose to walk away. They expected to see you weak, but now they have to look up just to see you. They thought your heartbreak would be your end, but now your empire stands as a testament to your resilience. They thought your pain would paralyze you, but instead, it pushed you to build something they could never touch. As the saying goes, the best revenge isn't payback, it's progress. They can't undo what's already done, and they can't stop the empire you've built with your bare hands. So, let them watch. Let them see what you've become. Their exit didn't break you. It made room for your greatness. They thought you'd fall apart, but instead, you built an empire. And that's something they'll never be able to control, diminish, or take away. Remember this: the throne you now sit on was built from every tear, every sleepless night, every shattered dream. You turned pain into power, failure into fuel, and rejection into rain. You are no longer the person they left behind. You are the ruler of an empire they never believed you could create. And now, let them watch you reign. And my friends, that is how you rise. They thought leaving you would be your downfall, but all they did was spark a fire they can't control. They believed you'd fall apart, but instead, you built something greater, something they'll never touch. You turned pain into power, rejection into resilience, and loss into legacy. Remember this: you are not the victim of their story, you're the author of your own. The ending they tried to write for you? Tear it up. You are the king, the queen, the ruler of your destiny. You decide what happens next. Your reign has just begun. And now, I have a challenge for you. If this video lit something inside you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another powerful message. Share this video. Help someone else find their strength. Be the reason someone rises when they thought all was lost. Say it one last time. I am the fire they can't control. Let them watch. Let them regret. Let them feel the weight of everything they lost. As you rise higher than they ever imagined, your empire awaits. Your story isn't over. It's just getting started.